You're listening to the Nourished Child podcast, episode number 22. Artificial Food Dyes with Laura Stevens. The idea of food affecting behavior and attention has been around for decades. Certain foods help our children learn, focus, and behave in a world full of distractions, while other foods seem to hinder these skills. Food in particular, those foods containing food dyes, have come under scrutiny. One study estimates that 43% of what kids eat contain artificial food dyes. I chat with food dye researcher Laura Stevens in this episode and uncover what we know about artificial food dyes, ADHD, and our food supply. You can find the show notes to this episode over at my website, jillcastle.com/022.
Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey you, welcome back. I'm super happy you're here. Happy New Year. I love starting the new year. I set goals, get re-energized, and I look forward to the opportunities to change, grow, and succeed. I always find the new year a nice, refreshing challenge to put on my plate. I always try to think about a word or mantra for the coming year. Last year, I used execute as my word. It was meant to motivate me to do the stuff I had in my brain. My challenge is, and always has been, to take all of my ideas and actually get them done. I am kind of cursed with a creative brain that has loads of ideas, thoughts, and projects. The problem is they occur in my head, and then they oftentimes get stuck in my head. So what I've done to compensate is to transcribe these thoughts onto paper as soon as they occur. I carry around this tiny little notebook every time I think of an idea for a show, or an idea for a blog post, or an idea for an ebook or a course. I write it down. And you should see the piles of paper full of notes that I have. But what happens is then, if I don't write it down, I get distracted and I forget what the idea is. A good example of that is oftentimes ideas will come to me while I'm out exercising. And I'll think these ideas through, and I'll get, really clear on what the topic is and how I want to do it. And then I get home and I get distracted. I'm answering phone calls, checking on emails, texting with my kids, and I completely forget what my idea was. So that's where I came up with this whole writing things down as soon as I get them. And that's why I used the word execute last year, so that I would not forget what my ideas were, and that I would actually get them on paper, put them on my calendar, and then get the idea turned into reality. But as you know, or many of you know, I am an entrepreneur who works alone. I am a one-woman band, and that limits me in some sense because I'm limited by the fact that I'm just a one person doing all this work. But I honestly, when I reflect back on 2016, and I will tell you, I do try to reflect on my quarters, my year, just different things within my life. And I think I did a good job of using my word execute last year. And I think I did because I know as a result, I knocked off most, if not all, the goals I wanted to accomplish. So you might be thinking, what's Jill's word going to be for 2017? And I think that this year, my word will be plan. I think my current system of using piles and piles of paper is holding me back a little bit, making me a little bit frazzled. So I bought myself a business planner, and I'm going to try out this tool to help me manage all those ideas and projects I have, all the commitments I've made, business-wise and life-wise, and use that tool to manage it all. Last December, I wrote a blog post at the end of the month about the gifts of 2016. This included my most popular blog posts, the projects I created and worked on, and the connections I made along the way. And yes, you are one of my gifts from 2016. I am so thankful for the time you allowed me to enter your head, the ideas you allowed me to pass on to you, the feedback you've offered, and the encouragement you give me to keep going. You cannot even know at all how much you motivate me to keep doing this podcast, and I want to thank you for that. Just a quick reminder, there are some new resources available on my website at jillcastle.com. I have a light version of the Kids Healthy Weight Project. You can find that at jillcastle.com/courses. And I have 2 new ebooks out. One called Try New Food, and another one, which is a companion to the Kids Healthy Weight Project, is called the Kids Healthy Weight Project Workbook. You'll find more ebooks and courses coming this year from me. I'm working on a course right now and am continually working on resources that will help you nourish and feed your child well. Speaking of which, what topics would you like to see me cover on this podcast? Are there any experts you'd like to see come on to the show? Let me know in the show notes comment section at jillcastle.com/22. That's 022 for 22. So for today, you are in for an interesting conversation. I got to know Laura Stevens after she published an article titled Amounts of Artificial Food Dyes and Added Sugars in Foods and Sweets Commonly Consumed by Children. She published this in 2014 in Clinical Pediatrics. Based on her article, I wrote a blog post highlighting the artificial dyes in foods and tied it to improving the diet of children with ADHD. Laura and I have been emailing back and forth ever since. She's been so gracious to offer her time and expertise today, and I spoke with her on the phone from her and my home state of Indiana. Laura has been interested in the relationships between diet, nutrition, health, and behavior for over 40 years. In the middle 1990s, she received her master's degree in nutrition science from the Department of Nutrition Science at Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana. She's remained at Purdue and has worked with her mentor and other colleagues to investigate the relationship between diet and ADHD. Their first study measured the amounts of essential fatty acids in the blood of normal children and children with ADHD. More recently, Stevens and her colleagues at Purdue have been interested in the effects of artificial food dyes on behavior in children. Apart from her work at Purdue, Laura has published 6 popular books about diet, behavior, and allergies. Her latest one is entitled Solving the Puzzle of Your ADD/ADHD Child: Natural Solutions for Hard-to-Raise Children. I will link to all 6 of her books in the show notes. She also writes an informative newsletter which can be found and subscribed to at youradhdnewsletter.com. As I mentioned, all the pertinent links to this show will be included in the show notes over on my blog, jillcastle.com/022. I've also linked to a free handout called the Healthy ADHD Diet, which touches on the overall nutrition for kids with learning and behavioral challenges. So let's not delay this interview any longer. Here's Laura. Hi, Laura. Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to have you here today, and I think you know that I came to know you after you published an article about artificial food dyes and added sugars in foods back in 2014 in Clinical Pediatrics. And ever since then, I've really respected your work. I think we've gone back and forth a couple of times on email. And,
That's right.
And I wanted to have you on the show today because I think what you're honing in on in terms of ADHD and artificial food colors is really important. And I wanted to pick your brain about your research in that area and the relationship to ADHD, but I also know you have some other work and areas of interest. So let's start there.
Well, yes, I do. I have interest in chronic fatigue syndrome and macular degeneration, in autism, and then the ADHD. I've done that. I've been doing that research for some time. And for the ADHD kids, we have at Purdue looked at artificial food dyes and essential fatty acids. Those have been our main interests. And then we're now looking at autism with the possibility of having a study in the future.
So what has your work in essential fatty acids, what have you found, or what is, that body of evidence, what is it showing, and in particular for children with ADHD?
Well, I got my master's degree in the mid-'90s, and for my dissertation or my thesis, I studied the fatty acid levels in the plasma and red blood cells of a group of ADHD kids and a group of controls. And we found that the ADHD kids, that there was a subgroup of them that had symptoms of fatty acid deficiency and lower blood measures of fatty acids. So some of the symptoms are really interesting because they're excessive thirst, frequent urination, dry skin, dry hair, dandruff, follicular keratoses, which is a big name for the little tiny bumps that can appear on the backs of your arms and sometimes on the fronts of the thighs, and broken fingernails. And so these are some of the symptoms that we looked at in these kids and found that there was about 40% of the ADHD kids had one or more of these symptoms and lower plasma levels of fatty acids.
And of course, there's good evidence out there about supplementing with essential fatty acids in these kids, correct?
Yes, that's right. We had a study where we gave them a fish oil supplement and either that or a placebo, which was olive oil. The problem was the olive oil turned out to be active and actually improved behavior also, but we could see that the fatty acid levels in the blood of the children who were taking the olive oil had changed. More levels of omega-3 fatty acids, although olive oil doesn't contain any significant amount of omega-3s. So there are other good things in olive oil. So that was a bad choice, but we still had some success, and especially with children who had conduct disorder, as a group, they improved on our supplement. So we learned a lot. Sure.
And it's really probably in a lot of ways set the foundation or continued the research in that area, because there is quite a bit of it. And in general, and this is sort of just almost backing up a little bit, but nutrition is so important for ADHD. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I happen to think it's really important for everybody, and especially for people who have any sorts of chronic illnesses. But yes, I think it really is important in ADHD.
Yes, and so one of the things, I work with and have worked with children one-on-one over the years, and I've done a fair amount of the I haven't conducted the research, but I've compiled the research, and I like to transfer that research into sort of applicable guidelines for parents to follow. But in my own practice, I've noticed that one of the things that is almost always present is a really out-of-whack diet for children with ADHD.
Yes, that's common. That's common. I personally did diet records for 100 children. It's been a while now, but analyzing their diet using computers, and it was an eye-opener. We had a child who actually had Coke and cookies for breakfast.
Hopefully that has improved over time, and kids aren't doing that. But some of the things I notice, yes, are inappropriate food choices, but also just irregular balance of eating throughout the day, sort of that what I call backloading, eating towards the end of the day and not having much in the front part of the day during the time when they're supposed to be learning and focusing and paying attention in school. And so there's a lot of sort of rehabilitation with the diet that I do with my clients, and I see pretty commonly.
Neat. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So, but one of the things, again, how I came to know you is on your research on artificial food colors. So let's focus on that, and I would love to understand how you got started in researching artificial food colors, particularly in children with ADHD.
Yes. Well, I had always been interested in the role of nutrition and diet in health and behavior, and so I decided in the late 80s that I wanted to go back to graduate school. So I went to graduate school at Purdue in the food nutrition department, and one of the very first seminars I went to was a presentation by another graduate student about artificial food dyes and ADHD. And so I thought, gee, that's really interesting. So I started reading information about that, and I looked at, there was not a lot of literature, but enough to make it look like there might be something there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always interested in that, even during the time that we did the fatty acid research.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the fatty acid research, I thought what was really needed was to measure the amounts of dyes in various foods and to come up with some kind of idea of what the child might be getting in a day, because a lot of the studies that looked at food dyes and their effects in ADHD kids didn't really find much.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was because they used amounts that were too low.
Mm-hmm.
Like they used a total of 26 milligrams, which turned out to be really probably way too low.
Mm-hmm.
And that studies that used 50 milligrams or more showed more kids were affected.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of researchers said, oh, well, kids don't consume 50 or more milligrams a day. And so that kind of spurred on my interest in measuring them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we did.
And did you find that kids do consume 50 milligrams a day? Some kids, or
some kids, it would be easy to.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, absolutely, not difficult at all.
Mm-hmm. So, what would you say is the prevalence of sensitivity to artificial food colors?
We really don't have a number for that. We really don't know. I think what we need is a study in the United States using all of our food dyes in reasonable amounts and testing them on a general group of children,
Mm-hmm.
not just ADHD kids, because there was a study done in the United Kingdom where they looked at they used a mixture of food dyes, and also they included the preservative sodium benzoate,
Mm-hmm.
and they found that there were ADHD kids who responded to that, but they also found that there were quote normal kids who also had more hyperactivity afterwards.
Mm.
So this means that it could be a public health problem, and not just a problem for ADHD.
So what you're saying is that there has been some evidence that children without ADHD or any other sort of learning or behavioral challenges that have been shown to be potentially sensitive to artificial food colors as well.
That's right. Now, the only problem, this was done by a guy by the name of Stevenson, and the only problem with that was that sodium benzoate was tried along with all the dyes. So they couldn't really say, well, it's the dyes those are causing the problem,
Mm-hmm.
because of the sodium benzoate. So what I think needs to be done is a large study in the United States using the dyes approved in the United States and the amounts consumed, and without sodium benzoate and the challenging
Mm-hmm. That confounder.
Yes, but nonetheless, the European Union went on to require that foods that contained dyes had to carry a label that said that this was in 2010 that the additives in the food could cause adverse effects on attention and activity levels in children. So, of course, manufacturers ended up taking out the dyes and replacing them with natural dyes. And so I don't know that any study has been done to see whether the number of ADHD kids has decreased at all in the European Union. I haven't seen that yet.
Well, that was big news. I remember that. And it continues to be big news. That's one thing that I see whenever you talk about artificial food colors in the United States, it almost always goes hand in hand with the fact that they're banned in the UK.
Right. They aren't really banned. You could use yellow number 5 if you wished in a product, but then you'd have to carry that warning label at the food. So parents would have the choice then. But I think in a lot of cases the manufacturers just discontinued using the dyes and did something else.
So earlier you outlined the signs of essential fatty acid deficiency that you saw in your subjects. How would a parent know if their child is sensitive to artificial food colors?
Well, one way is to remove them totally from the diet, and that for maybe a week or two. And this would require careful label reading. And then at the end of 2 weeks, try them back in. There's another way to do it that I recommended in my new book. It's to buy the little bottles of food dyes that you get in the grocery store, McCormick's or French's, and you put just a couple drops of each dye in a glass of water, and it will look muddy because it'll be a brown color from all the dyes. And then you ask your child to read from a book that is his level, and to write his name and perhaps print it and then draw a picture of himself or something like that. And then you let him drink the dyes. And you should do this when you're going to be around in case he has a reaction. And then after 30 minutes, then test to see how his reading is, asking to write again. And you could repeat that at 1 and 2 and 3 hours. And if there seems to be no reaction, then you could give him another glass of the dyes and see if that makes a difference. So this is a good way for parents to actually see what reactions the child has, and it may make the child aware that he doesn't feel great on this. He may have stomach aches or headaches or leg aches or something like that. And so he may be able to, the light goes off in his brain, hey, this maybe isn't so good for me.
And would he potentially experience complications with writing his name or drawing that picture or reading that book?
Yes.
So mostly when we talk about artificial food colors, we talk about this idea of hyperactivity. Is that something that you've seen and studied as well as one of the potential side effects?
We have not studied that ourselves. No, we have not actually given a group of ADHD kids the dyes, no.
So your research has really looked at the artificial color load of certain foods, correct?
Right.
Okay. So let's dig into that a little bit. How did you come up with the foods that you wanted to study?
I just went to the store and I looked at beverages and candies and cookies and cakes and everything, read the package label, and if it was colored, then I would choose it to analyze.
And how many foods did you end up analyzing in your research?
I think it was over 100. It was quite a few.
Okay. And it was, I remember, I saw the list.
Yes.
It was a long list.
It was.
And how did you scientifically sort of take me through, how do you actually determine the artificial food color load in a food product?
Sure. Well, it's pretty easy in the beverages.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you make up standards from the actual food dyes that we got from a manufacturer, and then we would make up dilutions of the beverage, and then there's a special machine called a spectrophotometer, and we would put the samples in there, and it would print out then how much. We would determine the wavelength of each of the dyes, and then based on that, the machine would spit out then an amount, and that we would then calculate how many would be in say 8 ounces of fluids.
Mm-hmm. And then for solid food, how did you do that?
That's more difficult. You have to, and the way we did it was different depending on the different foods. Especially if there was oil in it or anything of a lipid nature, that compounded the problem. And that was some of them were really easy to measure, like candies that were clear and didn't have a lot of other fillers and stuff in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So in your analysis, you diluted the artificial color somehow, some way. In beverages, it was easy to do. In solid foods, you probably had to tease out or separate out some of the solids. And
yes, we had to separate it out so we would just have the dye then and not the other stuff.
Okay.
Because that would mess up the spectrophotometry measurement.
Mm-hmm. And so then you were able to get a number, which was the load, right? The artificial color load within that product.
Right, and we would have to adjust it depending on the amount that we had sampled, and again, a lot of math, and then we would come to how much was found in a given food.
What types of foods in your research did you find hold the most artificial food colors?
I think it's beverages by far,
Mm-hmm.
because some of them are very vivid in color. The more vivid a beverage looks, the more dye it has in it. And then there's a lot of it. We reported values for just 8 ounces, but most kids probably drink 12 ounces or more of some of these pops and drinks. So I would say that those, in a really concentrated things like M&Ms. The M&Ms contain very bright colors,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a relatively small amount total compared to beverages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And for beverages, we're talking about things like sports drinks or sodas like Orange Crush, for example. I'm thinking
Exactly, and Big Red and fruit punches,
Mm-hmm.
Things like that, yes.
So the more vibrant the color of the beverage, the more artificial food color load there is. That makes total sense.
It does, doesn't it?
Yes. But here's a surprising thing that I think a lot of parents don't know. Foods that are white or foods that are clear can also contain artificial food colors, correct?
This is true. Of course, it wouldn't be all that much, but I discovered that we didn't measure these because it wouldn't have been easy to measure, but like marshmallows have a little bit of blue dye added to them, and some other things that were surprising.
I discovered that too. My son has a tree nut allergy, so I'm always making Rice Krispie treats because they're nut free.
Okay.
And I was doing a post on artificial food colors, and I looked at the ingredient label on the package of marshmallows, and it had blue dye in them, and I was very surprised by that.
Oh yes, it is. It's amazing.
So, what would you say that artificial food colors in the American diet are fairly prevalent or not?
Oh, absolutely. The University of North Carolina did a study that was reported in Clinical Pediatrics, and they found they weren't measuring the amounts; they were just measuring the presence of food dyes, and that of 810 foods that children commonly eat, 350 were dyed, and that's comes out to about 43%. So lots of foods and beverages and candies, and also things like mouthwash and toothpaste and children's vitamins and things like that are often dyed, or usually dyed. And medicine that you would give your child, if he has to take penicillin or whatever, it's liquid. It's going to be dyed and artificially flavored. And what you can do then is ask your doctor to look for a dye-free tablet. Like penicillin comes in white tablets.
So really, and the best way for parents to figure out if a product has artificial food colors in it is how?
It's really easy. You just look at the food label, the list of ingredients, and if it says blue number 1, blue number 2, yellow number 5, yellow number 6, green 3, or red 40 and red 3, then that indicates it has dyes in it. So any of those. And they have to, in the United States, they have to list that on the label.
Sort of like a food allergen, correct?
Yes. And yellow 5 is also called tartrazine. So it's sometimes, occasionally, it will have tartrazine listed in the food ingredients.
So,
but the most common one we found was red 40. That's the most prevalent in the U.S. And it's a bright red, fire engine red.
And do you know of any studies that look at the effects of each of these different artificial food colors on children's health? Has anybody conducted those studies that you know of?
There have been a couple of studies with tartrazine, which is yellow number 5, and some other studies too, and then the Stevenson study in the UK. The more the dose of the dye, the worse the behavior then.
So, and presumably over in Europe, since they've gotten rid of or discouraged is probably the better word to use, the use of artificial food colors in food, are we seeing different rates are we seeing research coming out since 2010 that might show differences in behavior amongst children with ADHD or even amongst children considered quote unquote normal?
I haven't seen such a study, but it's possible that something has been done along those lines. I'm not sure.
Your research I found it very fascinating. I was very drawn to it, and I'm sure others will as well. And I will include the reference links in the show notes so that people can actually see your research. Under the auspices of transparency and in knowing what you're eating and what's in your food, it is entirely, in my opinion, fair game to look at all aspects of food, including artificial food colors.
Oh, absolutely. And actually, some manufacturers are changing their practices. For example, Kraft has taken a yellow number 5 and yellow number 6 out of its macaroni and cheese that's sold for children. And Pepperidge Farm has a goldfish made with natural dyes instead of artificial ones. And Chick-fil-A has taken out their artificial colors. And Nestle has said that they will use natural colors instead of artificial ones. And your readers might be interested. I don't know if they realize that artificial food dyes come from petroleum. They're made from the byproducts of petroleum. I thought was kind of interesting.
And is it fairly easy to substitute natural food colors for artificial food colors in products?
No. I once did a study in undergrad school. I had to take a few undergraduate classes because one was in food science. And so I studied some natural colors compared to the artificial ones. And the artificial ones did much better in acid environments and in resisting temperatures. So, the companies are going to have to work at that. And actually, there is some concern about the natural ones. there's a psychiatrist at Ohio State who's been interested in all this for some time, Gene Arnold, and he has said, we don't really know what a really concentrated amount of, say, blue dye from blueberries, what the effect of that is. We're assuming because it's natural, then it can't harm us.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't really know that.
Mm-hmm. Fair point.
His point has been that we have an obesity epidemic in the United States, and we don't need to make foods any prettier for children.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We should just go with what the food has. And another interesting thing, in the food study that we did, we also reported the amount of sugar in each product.
Yes.
And that was very telling. And I would say that of all the foods and beverages that we studied, that there were very few that you could consider nutritious.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there were two strawberry milk products that I looked at. One had Red 3 and the other used Red 40. And there were no strawberries in them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, a parent thinking they're going to have something really healthy,
mm-hmm.
They pick up the strawberry milk. Oh, yeah, so anyhow, parents should make their own strawberry milk.
Right, right. Well, and that's the hard thing. I think that is exactly one of the things that attracted me as well to your study, and I forgot to mention it, but was the fact that you did tease out the amount of sugar in a lot of these products. And when you do look at these foods and you consider the artificial color load and you consider the amount of sugar, they really aren't very nutritious foods for your child, but they're very commonly found in American children's diets.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. We didn't really measure the sugar. That was the amount of sugar reported by the company,
mm-hmm.
each company that had made that food.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So it's great that there are some companies and manufacturers who are electing to remove artificial food colors. I love to hear that, and I'm so glad that you pointed out some of the companies that are doing that. Do you think we can expect more manufacturers to do the same things, or is this an anomaly?
So. No, I don't think so. I think, as companies are able to say, oh, well, we don't use any dyes in ours, or we use natural colors, then there will be pressure on other companies to do the same.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it certainly makes it much easier for parents in terms of navigating food in general for their children.
Right.
So what would your advice be for parents of children with ADHD regarding artificial food colors?
I would suggest that they try a diet without them for a week or two, and then perhaps test them and see if there is a reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just totally avoid them. You find similar products that aren't colored, and as I said, a lot of them are not nutritious. So you just tell your child, these are not nutritious foods. They're not going to help you do well in school. They're not going to help you grow and perform well at baseball or whatever would be appropriate for a given child. So we're not going to eat these anymore.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And just to play devil's advocate, what if a parent has a child that really, really likes these foods that are potentially causing him problems with his attention or focus or behavior?
I think there are times as a parent you just have to say, no, we're not gonna do that.
Mm-hmm.
And you never have them in the house. And when you go out, you're very careful about what you order to eat. And this is not good for your health. We're not going to do this.
Parenting 101.
Exactly. You have to take a stand somewhere.
Yes, yes. So, and then following up to that on a broader level for healthcare providers, because I do have parents that listen to this show, but also a lot of healthcare providers. What can healthcare providers do to help parents navigate artificial food colors?
Hand out listing foods that are dyed and
mm-hmm.
might be helpful.
I do.
That they could give their the patients.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I think that, and I think, more education around
Yeah.
What's in our food supply, and particularly if a healthcare provider is working with a child who has ADHD or autism. And we know scientifically, there's evidence that suggests that some of those children could be sensitive to artificial food colors. I think that would definitely warrant a conversation about them.
Yes. And then you can suggest that they get my new book.
Yes.
It's called Solving the Puzzle of Your ADD, ADHD Child, Natural Solutions for Hard-to-Raise Children. And it has all of what we've talked about today, and we'll give guidance on how to avoid the dyes and how to deal with this. And I have lots of recipes in there that will help parents cope. And in my opinion, helping a child with ADHD is like solving a jigsaw puzzle. You have to determine what pieces are important for your child. And unfortunately, your child may not have the same pieces as somebody else's child. So that makes it a little challenging, and that's the point of my book. It has lots of questionnaires that you can fill out and to determine whether, say, magnesium is likely to be low, whether the dyes are a problem, whether fatty acids are the problem, and so that they can identify what's important for their child and then follow the advice given.
Excellent.
So if people want to know more about it, you can go to my website. It's at youradhdnewsletter.com.
Awesome. And I will include those links in the show notes as well, so people can just click on the link and go straight to your website. And the book, again, the title of the book and where people can get it.
Solving the Puzzle of Your ADD, ADHD Child. You can get it online. You can get it at Amazon. You can get the ebook at Google Books.
Mm-hmm.
And it's cheapest there. But, of course, you don't get a print copy, but you do get all the substance of it. And that's cheaper, so I recommend that to people who like ebooks and are not bothered by that.
Perfect. And, Laura, before we wrap up, you've been such a great wealth of information. It's absolutely fascinating to hear your career journey in your research. Is there anything else you would like parents to know about artificial food colors or even fatty acids? Any parting words you'd like to leave with before we sign off?
Well, I think you have to realize that our bodies are like the most amazing chemical factory ever made, and at the front entrance you're delivering amino acids and fatty acids and glucose and vitamins and minerals. Then at the back, out the back door, comes over 100,000 different chemicals, and you want these to be in the right amount. So it's really important what you deliver to the front door. And then if you deliver things like the food dyes, they may get into the body and disrupt different pathways and be destructive and shut down these assembly lines. So I think that's one way of thinking of this whole thing.
Very good. Well, Laura Stevens, thank you so much for joining me today on the Nourished Child podcast. I'm sure everyone will love to listen in on this, and I will, again, include the show notes, all the links to Laura's research, her book, her website, her newsletter, so that you can continue to have a relationship with Laura and follow her work. Laura, thank you so much.
It was my pleasure, Jill. Thank you.
And there you have it. Laura is certainly a devoted researcher of nutrition and the health of children. Not only that, she is a prolific writer and author, so be sure to check out her books and subscribe to her newsletter. I found Laura's suggestions for eliminating food dyes practical and helpful. I often suggest this type of trial with my own clients, taking out all foods with dyes for a week or two and looking for improvement or changes. I know for some kids that might take away all of their usual foods, so take this advice and apply it as you see fit for your child, given his or her circumstances. I've never really thought about using liquid food colorings from the grocery store to test a child for a reaction, but her approach is certainly practical and may be particularly useful for families who are curious about their child's activity and behavior after ingestion of food with artificial dyes. I'm really glad you joined me today. If you do like the show and enjoy listening to the Nourished Child podcast, be sure to subscribe on iTunes or in your Android app. When you subscribe, you won't miss an episode. Go to iTunes on your laptop, computer, or phone and type The Nourished Child in the search box. Tap on the icon with the show artwork, hit the View in iTunes button, then tap the subscribe button under the picture. It's as easy as that. I'm so happy you joined me today. Be sure to get your new year started off right. Think of your word that you want to focus on for the year that reflects the goals for personal improvement and better lifestyle and living for you. As always, give the child in your life, big or small, a loving squeeze today.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.